Welcome, everyone. Can everyone hear me all right? Yeah, good. My name is Faye, and I am the co-director and director of campus coordination for the Post-Landfill Action Network. We're a nonprofit network of student leaders across the country working towards zero waste, and we are incredibly honored to be partnering with Patagonia, helping them put on this tour. We'll be on the road for 3 months, 21 campuses, seeing the campuses that are changing the game of waste across the country. So tonight we have an awesome set of speakers. Our 3 speakers who I'll be introducing are right here. And I'll introduce all 3 of you, and then you can take it away.
Great.
Just a quick announcement. At some point a little bit later in the evening, we're going to do a raffle. So stick around until that happens. We'll do some questions afterward as well. All right, so Rick Ridgeway is Patagonia's Vice President of Public Engagement. His magazine articles have appeared in National Geographic, and he is the author of 6 books, including 7 Summits, The Shadow of Kilimanjaro, and Below Another Sky. National Geographic honors him with its Lifetime Achievement of Adventure Award. We also have Adam Werbach, who is a lifelong environmental activist. He is working to stop new efforts to gut the Paris Climate Accord, build the Dakota Access Pipeline, and destroy the Environmental Protection Agency. Werbach was elected president of the Sierra Club when he was 23 years old. As a student, he was a leader in the fight to create Death Valley and Joshua Tree National Parks. And finally, we have Scott Briscoe. Scott has been involved in adventure sports and the outdoors for 27 years. He is the recipient of the Andrew W. Mellon Fellowship and a member of the first African-American team to climb Denali. Scott has worked with the National Outdoor Leadership School, or NOLS, to share his Denali experience with over 15,000 youth of color throughout the country. And I just want to thank the Yale School for the Environment and Business and the Office of Sustainability. We're very happy to be here, and I will pass it off to Adam.
Great. Thank you, Faye.
Thanks.
Hello. What to do, how to live. What to do, how to live. That's the theme of our conversation this afternoon. And when you think about this idea of personal action on a threatened planet, the challenge is to ask, in this particular moment, with the type of political upheaval we feel right now, what actually is the effective choice for your effort, for your labor, for your heart, your care? And tonight, or this afternoon, we hope to give you kind of 3 different views on that, 3 different aspects. One, I'll talk about politics, because this actually is a political moment, and to ignore it seems to be folly. Rick is going to talk about business and how what you choose to do with your career is essential to this question. Will you put your labor towards companies that actually have these values at their core, or it will be something else? And Scott is going to talk about the power of nature, nature as a transformative entrance point to living a fulfilling life. And I know you'll enjoy the stories that he'll share. Okay, so you ready? Does that sound good? We're all in? So we're in an intimate room, and we've been on tour for a little while now, and we've been sort of in bigger rooms. I've been playing a song. Are you up for that? Yeah? You can handle a song? Do you think they're up for it, Rick? Oh, yeah. Do they really know? Oh, you have to sing. Should I tell them that first? Okay. So, yeah, still into it. All right. So we mentioned the moment. Oops. Oh, I did the wrong thing. No, sorry. What do I hit, down? No. All right. Apologies.
No worries. You got to get the old guy up here to show you the tech.
Rick, you got to explain it. There we go. All right. This is a song about an elephant. It's called Jumbo the Elephant. It's an old labor song by an artist named Leon Rosselson. It's not about Republicans. But it is about how you actually step forward and fight people who are on your back. So there's two characters. One is a mayor. When you hear the word mayor, you're supposed to boo. You wanna try that? Mayor. Good. See, they get this. They can do this. Yeah. All right, and when you hear Jumbo, the elephant, you cheer. So Jumbo.
Yeah.
All right, you got it. All right. And the song goes like this. Jumbo the elephant, he was an elegant. Oh, sorry. We'll go up here. Jumbo the elephant, he was an elegant, and his intelligence was small. You try that? Jumbo the elephant, he was an elegant, and his intelligence was small. Good. And this part. But he was a hell of a nice sort of elephant, willing and mild like a lovable child, obedient to everybody's call. Try that second part. But he was a hell of a nice sort of elephant, willing and mild like a lovable child, obedient to everybody's call. All right, here it goes. A Jumbo lived in the jingle jangle of a concrete town. He worked hauling girders, hauling debris, till the night came down. Never known another home, he was as happy as he could be. Everyone gave him buns, added and petted him playfully. And the mayor, good, yeah, you got it, owned half the town and owned Jumbo too. And the mayor, who taught him all the things an elephant should do. And the mayor, when the town came out for the Liberty Parade, and the mayor, as the crowds cheered and the brass bands played, proud as a cat in his cockadoodle hat, the fat mayor sat on the elephant's back. Oh, and now this. Jumbo the elephant, he was an elegant, and his intelligence was small. But he was a hell of a nice sort of elephant, willing and mild like a lovable child, obedient to everybody's call. All right, here's where the revenge comes in. Then one Sunday, as the dry winds flickered through the summer heat, they came to watch the elephant performing all his tricks in the crowded streets. Suddenly, for all to see, Jumbo stopped, heard the mayor call his name, Jumbo. Silently, defiantly, Jumbo was playing another game. And the elephant raised his trunk and shattered the sky. And the elephant, all through the crowd, they could hear the jungle cry. And the elephant, Jumbo, cried the mayor as he was hurled to the ground. And the elephant, all through the crowd, they could hear the sickening sound. A tit for a tat. You could hear the bones crack as the elephant sat on the fat mayor's back. And Jumbo the elephant, he was an elegant, and his intelligence was small. But he was a hell of a nice sort of elephant, till he turned wild like a violent child. You know you can't trust an elephant at all. Thank you. I mean, sometimes you need to play songs and laugh a little bit, because if you take politics too seriously, you'll just cry, right? I mean, it's just, what's happening is crazy. And you know, when we planned this and thought about it, I wrote a speech and thought about some of the things we'd talk about, but things are very different right now. I mean, Donald Trump has been a game changer to the political situation facing America, and we talk about these large challenges like climate change or wilderness preservation, et cetera. To not talk about it directly would be a great loss. So personal action on a threatened planet is, in a very real way, political. John Muir, who was the founder of the Sierra Club, was a Scottish immigrant who, climbed some of the first peaks in the Sierra, and was responsible for kicking off a lot of the preservation of our first national parks. A trip to Yosemite with Teddy Roosevelt was really a kind of a key moment in the birth of conservation. And he had this philosophy that you shouldn't talk about politics when you're outdoors. You should use those moments to really enjoy the wonder of nature. But he also believed that when you came back, when you got back into the city, you actually had to have those political discussions, because we wouldn't actually be able to preserve or protect the places we care about unless we actually had that actual political engagement. And for me, that's been kind of instructive. I started out as a student activist. My first action was actually signing a petition when I was 8 or 9 years old This was when James Watt was the Secretary of the Interior, who has really ringingly similar aspects to Zinke, who's our new Secretary of the Interior. And Watt proposed a privatization of some of our national parks. And the Sierra Club at the time sent out petitions all across the country asking people to sign them and collect them. And so I took it to my second grade class and had them grade, remember those big second grade pencils we all had? And the assignment in school that day was to sign our names. So I brought the petition and got my friends to sign that. And we all did it. The teacher was excited. And I took it around to the rest of the school and maybe got 200 or 300 signatures. And those 200 or 300 signatures connected with lots of other kids who were doing the same thing. And together we had 1 million signatures. And about 6 months after that, James Watt was fired. For me, I was bitten by the activist bug, believing that little things that you can do, even if you're just a kid, even if you can't vote, could actually make a real difference to changing political reality. When I was older, not much older, I grew up in Los Angeles. I remember first stage smog alerts when I was growing up, that I would open up to page 2 of the LA Times to see if there was a first stage smog alert, because my mom had taught me that. And if there was, my t-ball practice would be canceled, and I knew I just didn't need to bring my glove to school. Now, there's something fundamentally wrong when children have to open the paper to see if it's safe to go outside, to see if the air is safe to breathe. And fortunately, today, because of the Clean Air Act and a raft of 1970s legislation, there are very few first-stage smog alerts in Los Angeles. And in fact, the air across the United States is much better. If you go to Delhi, if you go to Shanghai, it's a very different thing. Shanghai's closed its schools for a large part of December. In Delhi, roughly 1/2 of the children have permanent lung damage now from the air quality. That's just horrifying. Those are the fundamental pieces of laws and legislation that Trump is after right now. And the plan that Pruitt, there's new Secretary of the EPA, the administrator of the EPA, has is to basically take out those building blocks piece by piece to undo the environmental progress that we've seen over the last 40, 50 years in America. That one agreed upon thing of progress, because we can all agree, wherever we're arguing, that children shouldn't have to worry about the quality of the air that they breathe or the water they drink. And yet we know in very real ways that if you go to Flint, Michigan, it very much is that case. So the agenda is not finished. And in fact, as we know, the agenda was definitely focused on a certain group of people and then ignored a lot of other folks at the same time. So this is not a moment we should be kind of moving backwards. It's a moment we should be completing the mission of the original environmental movement. I stayed active. I started something called the Sierra Student Coalition, which is a student program. I became president of the Sierra Club. And while there, I just threw myself into it. I was a part of the Kyoto negotiations. I worked to protect the California desert. I ended up joining the board of Greenpeace. I did all of these things, but got extraordinarily frustrated at the pace of change we were seeing in the environmental movement. That somehow what we found was that people were finding other things that were more important to actually move the agenda. So when I was approached by Walmart to think about how we could actually change the way that the largest company in the world was selling things, at first I recoiled, because my belief was that as an environmentalist, my job was to end companies like that, really just to shut them down, break them apart as monopolies, and destroy them. But for me, that was a moment to sort of say, maybe there is something else. Maybe there's a moment where we actually have to figure out how we can take steps to look at some of the largest companies in the world and how they can actually be advocates. Not just people who are in the way, but how can they actually be leaders in the movement in the space. And that was some great work that I was happy to do along with Rick, which hopefully he'll talk a bit about. The challenge with that type of work is that it doesn't add up. If you sell more things, even if they're better, a little bit better, so Tide with less water in it, or plastics with less toxics in them, if you sell more and more each year, it doesn't really add up. The math doesn't work. It's terrible, terrible math. And I was, at that point, really enthralled with the idea of sharing. Like, how do we actually push forward this dematerialization movement? And started a company called Yurtle with the very simple mission of trying to find a way for us to share things instead of buy new ones. And that's actually how I began working more closely with Patagonia, because the Worn Wear program is to is basically we're helping them figure out how the logistics work for it so that they can actually get back and forth. Because used goods are better than new, but the logistics of how to make that work don't really exist right now. You know, basically things are all meant to go from one way, from China to here, and then the empty boats go back, maybe with recycling in them. But Patagonia has found a different way to approach that. So after all of this, and after all of these challenges, we have this consumer culture that's set up where we have massive psychological problems in the American public that need to get dealt with. So hoarding this year has been added to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Illness. And hoarding as a condition reverse correlates with wealth. But between hoarding, clinical hoarding, and oniomania, which is compulsive buying disorder, about 10% of Americans are struggling with just having too much stuff. It's a very strange kind of post-Maslowian challenge where we spent a huge part of human history trying to just get enough. And now all of a sudden we have too much. Not everyone, not everywhere. That challenge is an extraordinary one for us. All of this together ends this moment when we have extraordinary needs for political change, consumer change, and activism. And in the context of that, we have this political threat facing us. So as we know what the problems are, we have Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is not a solution to this, he's the barrier. Today, the greatest single threat to the planet is Donald Trump and the Republican Congress. And that truth is kind of an uncomfortable truth for those of us who believe that this is actually something that we can align on, that ecology and environmentalism is not a partisan issue. It's something that we all can come and work on. But we have a terrible truth that we face, which is that politically, unless we change that, there is no progress. We are stuck and actually going the wrong direction. And the terrible math is that we can't continue to go this direction. We were actually going way too slow to start with. And to all of a sudden hit into reverse when we're heading straight towards a cliff just means the engine falls out of the car. Doesn't mean we get there any faster. That's the political context. So as we sort of consider this moment, as you consider the terrible facts and the lights that we can see, I'm really excited to bring up Rick Ridgeway, who is the Vice President of Public Engagement for Patagonia, a good friend, and one of the most inspiring people I have ever met. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. How to live and what to do. Certainly in the context of those two questions, we have to consider how business intersects with our lives, how certainly as consumers, what kind of companies we're going to choose to provide the goods and services that we all need. But for all of you in the room who are students, I think most importantly for you, who are you going to work for? Who are you going to work with? And to consider that, I thought I would spend a few minutes sharing with all of you today a little bit about our company, Patagonia, what we do, how we do it, and certainly most importantly, why we do it.
It is no secret that America needs more farmers, but we need the tools to be successful.
Revolutions start from the bottom.
In fall 14, we had 11 fair trade certified styles. In fall 16, we're going to be at 200. And in fall 17, we're going to be at 300 styles, and that's 30% of our product line.
So I'm assuming that some of you here this afternoon were at our Worn Wear event on campus today. We guesstimating that we had about 1,000 people lined up. I think we did about 500 do-it-yourself repairs and sales of used but still serviceable Patagonia gear. And the event was centered around our Worn Wear mobile that's touring one coast to the next, and that includes stops today here at Yale, where we offered free repair to use Patagonia products, as well as fixing stuff from our competitors to give it a second life.
This lived with me when I guided the John Muir Trail. I always had this. And it has been a bell cap triple direct. It was an all-girls team. It was my best friend and myself. And we spent 5 days on it, and it never came off of me. About 4 years ago, I gave up being a guide and I became a farmer. And so this is the last relic piece of my guiding days, and it's my favorite.
So we get a lot of stories like that. But from a business perspective, when you encourage your customers to fix their old stuff and buy used and instead of buying new, how does that square? I mean, even when you get feel-good stories like this young woman who brought in her jacket for repair along with a photograph of her father holding her as a child wearing the exact same jacket that now she's wearing. Well, to answer that question, let's go back to the beginning of our company, starting with the fact that Patagonia is still privately held and still owned by the family of our founder, who is Yvon Chouinard. That's the guy with the hammer, and he still comes into the office every day every day that he isn't surfing or fly fishing. So I guess he's not coming in that much. But he started off in the late 50s, early 60s as a blacksmith, making pitons and carabiners, hammers, hardware for rock climbers and mountaineers. He opened a blacksmith shop in Ventura, California, and he located it there for the really important business reason that it was just a short walk to a really good surf break. And then he hired his friends, and they were referred to appreciatively and today, I think even reverentially as dirt bags. But then by the early 70s, Yvon expanded the line to include a few items of clothing for climbers, shirts, pants, and shorts that were made with the same dedication to quality and even more importantly, the dedication to durability as the climbing hardware. And in fact, back in those days, we called the clothes software as opposed to the hardware for climbers. And then we had to drop that word when that guy up in Seattle started using it to name his products. But the clothes, they were designed by dirtbags and they were worn by dirtbags, and that became our founding culture. And we strove to capture that in the early photographs that we ran in the first Patagonia catalogs, where we really worked hard not to take ourselves too seriously. We really tried to avoid hiring pro athletes, and instead we used photographs of the more lunatic fringe of our sport. We did everything we could to avoid a macho look, and in fact we went out of our way to tell people that our gear was for women as much as it was for men. And we also ran photographs that showed the true story, what it's like to be a mom in a world where everything doesn't always go perfectly. And we love photographs like these that came in from our customers, that were real, that were definitely what today you may not call politically correct. In fact, the most notorious photograph we ever ran in our history was this one. And it ran about almost 40 years ago now. And we got thousands of letters, you can imagine. And I Googled this shot just recently. I Googled Patagonia baby toss. That's all I had to put in. And I got 200,000 hits. And a lot of letters, some of them still really recently. Comments like, "This photograph makes me sick." But we've always followed our own rule book, as you can probably tell. And I think that's one of the reasons we've been called the coolest company on the planet. So how does that happen? How do you go about creating the coolest company in the world? Well, let's go back to the history again, beginning with the fact, as I said, that essentially we were the people we were making our gear for. We were skiers and climbers and surfers. We still are. We are our own customers. And that includes Yvonne and me, we go way back. Gosh, if I counted the years now, I think it's about 50, with a lot of adventures under our belts, like this one coming off of a successful ascent of Denali, the highest mountain in North America, as Scott's going to tell you about a little bit more. Not about this climb, and certainly not about the after party. And I don't think you partied like we did, Scott. In fact, I'll just say there's a lot more than alcohol involved. But Yvonne and I climbed in a lot of places, including Patagonia, the place. And in 1968, Yvonne had made what back then was only the third ascent of the emblematic peak, Fitzroy, the highest peak on the skyline in that photograph, and along with his climbing partner, Doug Tompkins, who had founded the North Face. And for both of them, it was a very, very influential trip that really set the directions for their lives. And I'll let Yvonne tell you just a bit about that in this film clip from a movie that we made at Patagonia called 180 South.
And picked up a 16mm Bolex camera to record the trip. Loaded the car up with surfboards and climbing gear and took off for a 10,000-mile trip down south. I think from the time we decided to go was like 2 weeks before we went. We bought this old van and took off from Ventura. 1968, you gotta remember the Pan American Highway was pretty wild. It was dirt road from Mexico City all the way south. It was like being in Montana or Wyoming 100 years ago. Here we're in an area that's the size of the whole American West, with no people.
For those of us that grew up going out into the wilds of the world, where nature was basically untouched, we got into our souls a sense of beauty.
That trip had a big influence on both Doug and I. It kind of set the course for what we were going to do later in life. For me, it was the best trip of my life.
So after he returned from Patagonia, that's when Yvonne started to sell a few items of clothing, again, as I told you earlier, that were made for climbers. And then in 1973, he spun that part of the business off. And that was only 5 years after this climb of Fitzroy. And that's where the inspiration came from, to call the business Patagonia. And that's where the logo came from. That high point on the skyline in your logo is Fitzroy. So sports like climbing and skiing and surfing, as I told you, they're the foundation of our company. But also the experiences that we've had doing those sports, they're the direct inspiration for our commitment to environmental protection at our company. And when Yvonne climbed Fitzroy back in the late 60s, it was, as he told you, surrounded by complete wilderness. And he and I went back there just 20 years later to the exact same spot that had been as wild as the beginning of time. And there was this grid laid out with the street signs erected for what today is an actual small city called Chaltén. It was seeing firsthand the effects of the continued clear-cutting of the beech forest in Patagonia that are going to take generations to regrow if they ever do. And in Patagonia, as well as in many other places around the world, we've seen with our own eyes the effects of overgrazing that's led to erosion and even many grasslands turning into deserts. We've also seen in our own lifetime the glaciers begin to recede and even in some cases completely disappear. as the planet's continuing to warm with greenhouse gas emissions. And when you've seen things like this, when you've actually borne witness to geological change, in your own lifetime, you feel morally obligated to do something about it. We do. And since we're in business, we've had to ask ourselves how we can use our business as a tool for environmental protection. And that's what we've done, and we've done it nearly since the beginning of the company. And by the early 1990s, we were able to codify this commitment into a mission statement. And it starts with, first of all, making the best product we can, because durable products are used and reused for years, that are used and reused for years have the lowest environmental footprint by far. That's what worn wear is all about. We'll talk about that in a little bit more. But in addition to durability, the next part of the mission is to make that best product causing no unnecessary harm. And then finally, it's to use our business to inspire and implement solutions to the environmental crisis. So let's use the mission now as the frame to continue to examine what Patagonia does, how it does it, and why it does it. So going to that build the best product part, I've already explained how a durable product used for 15 and 20 years really has the lowest footprint. But durability is also super important if you're climbing a big wall in the Himalayas, because the quality of your jacket can literally make the difference in whether you come home or not. And the same's true if you're surfing big waves, like our surf buddy and ambassador Ramon Navarro is in this photograph at his home break in Chile. But Ramon expects us, not only to make him the highest quality, most durable wetsuit, but to make it causing no unnecessary harm. Now, notice we don't say cause the least harm. Causing no unnecessary harm it's an interesting phrase. First, it's grammatically incorrect. It's a double negative. And if you take out the two negatives, you're left with what? Causing harm. And that essentially is our definition of sustainability, that the manufacture of all consumer goods causes some amount of harm, and our self-imposed goal, therefore, is to cause no unnecessary harm. And in the case of our wetsuits, that means replacing the component fabric in the neoprene with neoprene that's made from rubber instead of from petroleum. And we source the rubber from trees in Guatemala, and the process reduces greenhouse gas emissions over from traditionally made neoprene by about 80%. We've done a careful LCA life cycle assessment of that. The trees themselves in Guatemala are managed and grown by locals that have been tapping them for over 70 years now, approaching 80. The plantations have been certified by the Forest Stewardship Council, and I know here in the School of Forestry, of course, you guys know a lot about that. But we wanted to see the condition of the forest for ourselves, so Ramon and some of our team, including some scientists on our material team, went down there to talk to the workers, to examine the trees in the forest and assess the health and biodiversity of the forest, because we had to know it for ourselves. And that's also true in the example of the down that goes into our jackets, where we've traced every single feather we buy to the farms that produce the down, to make sure that they're neither force feeding nor live plucking the geese. And this includes having to go all the way back to the parent farms. And you can see in this drawing that knowing that supply chain is pretty complex. This is from a screen grab from a video we made called What the Pluck. You can check it out on our website. So you got to do this. You've really got to map the supply chain if you're going to cause no unnecessary harm. And that's sometimes tough to do. So now let's go back to the third part of our mission. Again, using our business to inspire and implement solutions to the environmental crisis. Another way we do that perhaps seems a little bit curious at first glance for a company making apparel, but our company is deeply supporting civil society. And the main way that we support civil society to support environmental protection is through our 1% for the Planet initiative, where we donate 1% of our sales to environmental groups. And I didn't say profits, but sales right off the top. So good year, bad year, rain or shine, profit or no profit, that money goes into a fund that grows as we grow. And it is distributed to, last year, 824 environmental groups around the world. Most of them smaller grassroots organizations with volunteers like these guys trying to save the Colorado River, and who couldn't give a grant to these people? So trying to protect rivers was really the historical origin of our commitment to supporting civil society, to supporting activists and activism. And again, I'm going to let Yvonne explain that history to you in this next film clip.
In the 70s, the city wanted to channelize the Ventura River, and there was a city council meeting, and so we decided to all go because we were concerned that it was going to hurt the sand flow. And so we showed up, and there were all these scientists there saying, it's not going to hurt the river because it's a dead river, so just forget about it. And at the end of the talk, a young grad student got up and showed a slideshow of all the life along the river. All the eels and the birds that nest along the river and the raccoons. There was still 50 steelhead that go up that polluted river. And it wasn't dead at all. And that brought the house down, and it showed me what one individual can do, the power of one individual. That led to us starting a Friends of the Ventura River. And now we're working on trying to take out a dam upstream that is preventing the steelhead from going up into one of the tributaries. I really like the idea of taking out no longer useful dams. When you take out a dam, that's a real victory. I mean, a concrete victory, so to speak. It's gone. And then that allows fish to migrate up. It stops the water from heating up. People built those dams, and people have the responsibility to take them down. I think all of us are responsible for doing something. I mean, if you're a good speaker, you should get out and speak about the injustices of the world. You know, if you're a good writer, write about it. If you have nothing but free time, you should volunteer for good causes. To do good, you actually have to do something.
So we started a campaign, and we made a film called Damnation to support the removal of old and useless dams, and also to get people to oppose new dams when there are alternatives, as there nearly always are, including a dam that was proposed on this river in our namesake region of South America, Patagonia, the largest free-flowing river remaining in Chile, and in part because of our support and the NGOs especially that worked on this, that resulted in the largest civil society protest in the history of the country, with 100,000 people marching on their equivalent of the White House. The president pulled the proposal and the river remains free-flowing. So it probably seems kind of weird to have an apparel company focused on dam removal, but I guess that's what happens when you're privately held and the owner of the company says that means we get to do whatever we want because he's a fly fisherman. Well, that's what we do. And also it's because we have a different definition of who the real shareholders of the company are, and we explain that idea in this ad where we said that, you know, without a healthy planet, there aren't any shareholders. So let's go back again to that last part of our mission. Another way that we activate this commitment is extending our brand into other products with the same exact mission. We've done that in books. We have a publishing arm that's published 20 some odd titles now, all mostly environmental and related books, nature protection books. But 3 years ago, we also launched a brand extension into food. It's called Patagonia Provisions. And we're doing this because we realize that the footprint on the planet from food and food production is huge. It's the biggest of any of our human activity. And the promise of food to reduce our human footprint is just as big. Well, right now we just have a few products in startup phase, actually a little out of the startup gate, I guess. Several fruit bars, quite a few varieties of dried soups now, more than you see here. We have a bison jerky product and a cold smoked salmon. Everything has ingredients that in some cases actually go way beyond being just sustainable. And they go into agricultural and grazing practices that collectively are called regenerative. All the meat, for example, in the bison jerky product is sourced from a large ranch in South Dakota where the owners manage the bison so that they rotate between large paddocks, and it replicates the way bison used to roam freely across the Great Plains. And this in turn allows the native grasses to maximize soil health. And that in turn, as I'll explain more in a moment, begins to actually pull carbon out of the air and store it back into the ground. Late last year, we also launched a new product that we're very proud of called Long Root Ale. Yes, Patagonia is getting into the beer business. And we're doing it because we're making beer from a perennial grass called Kernza that uses these regenerative products for its production. And just check this out. That's Kernza on one side and traditionally grown wheat on the other. Now what happens as that soil of the perennial grows deeper and deeper into the ground, 10, 15, even 20 feet? What happens is two things. The soil begins to act like a sponge and retain more water so that in times of drought, the Kernza doesn't need nearly as much water as traditionally grown grains. But the second thing is the really astounding part. As the root systems go deep, they also support a complex biome of organic matter, dead and alive, that of course is made from carbon. And the soil, as the health increases, pulls so much carbon out of the air and pulls it back down into the ground that from farms like this one and other ones making other grain products in different soil types, different climate types around the world, there's enough of these proof of concept farms out there now that have actually measured the amount of soil carbon in the ground, down meter, 2 meters deep, that it's getting more accurate to extrapolate what would happen if this scaled. And right now, those extrapolation numbers suggest that if we scaled this to 40 or 50% of all current agriculture and grazing lands on planet Earth, we could pull enough carbon out of the air to get us down to pre-industrial levels, 290 parts per million. So that's why we're in the food business. And now, another way we do it. Well, we did it here today, we hope, inspiring you guys, some of our customers, and even if you're not, to think about these things with our Warnware program that we designed around the existing R's, starting with repair. That's where the Warnware initiative started just a couple years ago, doing things like our event here today, where also today we rolled out the next phase of Warnware, which is resell, where we're taking some of the returns that come back to us, gear that we get back that's used, we repair it, clean it, and resell it to you guys. So now that we include resell in this, I'll give you, I'm going to show you another video clip that explains the short history of the Warnware initiative to date.
Warnware began with recycling. We figured out we could melt down our garments when they were done and make more. Then we told you not to buy more. Reuse your stuff. It's got a lot of life left in it. Then came the stories we wear. They gave us a reason to keep our gear in action for generations to come. Then we realized repair was so important, we traveled the country doing it. And now, we want to buy your gear back so it doesn't sit in your closets, so that someone who needs it can buy it for not much money because it's used, or as we like to call it, better than new.
So you heard in our video that we actually started off years ago with recycle, and now we're starting to shine the light back on that. So when the stuff's truly worn out and it can't be repaired anymore, bring it back to us and we'll use the best technology available, depending on fiber of manufacturer, to recycle it, in some cases even in a true closed loop process. So those are the 3 R's. But you'll see on the slide it says 4 R's. And the last one, by far, is the most controversial, reduce. And we've been mulling and thinking about this since the business started in the early 70s. We've really paid attention to the projections that came out of the so-called Club of Rome in the early 70s about what happens on a planet with an increasing population when that population continues to increase annually. Its influence, its use and consumption of stuff. So we've ran the numbers, and they're pretty scary. And that's why just a few years ago, on Black Friday, this is one of our favorite days to actually do radical stuff. On Black Friday, we ran that full-page ad in the New York Times for their best-selling jacket. It was funny when we called up the Times and said we wanted to buy a full-page ad space. They got really excited. They thought they had a new customer. And when they got the mock-up of this ad, they kind of shit in their pants because they didn't know what to do with it. I mean, they'd never seen anything like this, and we insisted they run it at the end of the Macy's ads. And the headline was meant to shock. It was meant to pull you down into the copy where you would learn, despite our efforts to make that jacket causing no unnecessary harm, guess what? It had used 135 liters of water, and it had left behind it emitted 20 pounds of CO2 gases, and it had left behind 2/3 of its weight in waste. And we wanted to remind our customers, we wanted to remind everybody, of all the indicators of the planet's health, and you guys all know what they are. The hockey stick graph, the rising temperature graph, the rising sea level graph, the rising continued surge in global energy consumption. And the graph of fertilizers and pesticides and insecticides, and some studies that have shown newborns with over 250 times the amount of chemicals that natural born should have in their bloodstream. And I told you at the beginning of the show how, with my own eyes, over my own lifetime, I've witnessed so much deforestation in the wildlands where I used to tromp. And so much of that, and so much of all these things together responsible for the extinction crisis that we're into now, where up to 1,000 times the rate of normal background extinction of species is underway. So at Patagonia, we consider these indicators of the planet's health, the real key performance indicators, the KPIs, with which we have to measure our own actions. And since they're all tanking at our company, we're realizing we're not doing nearly enough. Some of you may have seen this slide of the Planetary Boundaries Works that's just coming out of Sweden in the last 18 months to 2 years, where they've developed a framework of the areas where they believe we're perhaps at, or in some cases exceeding, the boundaries of the planet's ability to rejuvenate itself. And I'm sure many of you here know the statistics coming out of the group in Washington that's composed of nearly 300 scientists that estimate that on a global basis we're using about 1.5 times the resources that the planet can restore on an annual basis. And I know many of you know that here in the United States that ratio is 7 to 1. Some scientists say 5 to 1, but either way, you don't need an MBA to know that long term, that's simply unsustainable. So how are we going to get from 7 Earths back to 1 Earth? Well, that's the theme of the day for our talk. What should you do and how should you live? And I started off by suggesting that for all of us in the room, for all of us in our society, all of us in developed countries, there's absolutely one thing we can all do, and that is to buy our goods and our services only from companies that are committed to making a difference, that are committed to what in business we call, shareholder value, stakeholder value instead of just shareholder value, who are committed to using their business as a tool for good, for giving back. And that's why I went deep into what we do at Patagonia, how we do it, and why we do it. Hoping that it could inspire some of you to think about voting with your wallets. But the main thing I want to leave with you this afternoon is this idea that I also mentioned at the top of my presentation, that much more than your role as consumers, your role as business people going out into the business world is arguably much, much more important. And I know this to be true because I go out there and I get on the inside of a lot of big companies in my role. I'm kind of in a privileged position. Our little old company has, it's a dinky company. We're not even $1 billion yet. And we get invited on the inside of the biggest companies in the world. Like Adam said, we work very closely with Walmart to try to turn that behemoth. And, we angled it a little bit differently. We really did. They're steering it a little bit different. And when, they're, at the time we were working with them, they were the biggest company in the world. I think they're 2 or 3 now. But that's 480, nearly $500 billion a year in sales. You move that ship a little bit, and the numbers, the impact is immense. So I'm telling you this because I'm on the inside. I talk to the CEOs. Even in some cases, I get to go camping and sit around the fire with them where you can really get, in on the inside view. And I'm going to tell you, these guys are all scared. They're all paying attention because they know that if they don't pay attention, you're not going to work for them. And even the people leading the most conservative companies in the run, even Rupert Murdoch knows this. I know that for a fact, that they're watching this at News Corporation because they're realizing nobody's going to work for them if they don't commit to these wider goals and if they don't do it with full transparency, because guess what? You're not going to work for them. And if you do work for them, then you're going to go in on the inside as the 5th column, and you're really going to drive the change from inside as well. That's the power that you have. To me, it's the biggest driver of sustainability going right now, bigger than any of the other ones. And we can talk about the other ones in our Q&A if any of you care to. But I'm just going to close by reminding all of us that whether it's this role as citizens or as business people, we're all in it together. You guys know that. So thank you very much. And now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Scott. And do you come up next, Adam? Right to Scott. And I red-eyed in here, so I got to revive myself. Anyway, Scott's going to now tell you a little bit about, his unique viewpoint about the value of getting into nature for all of us, but in particular, in Scott's case, about why all of us need to do a better job. And I must say, all of us in our company at Patagonia, we're very aware of our shortcomings, to really get people of color, to get people from other groups and societies into nature where, you can have those experiences that are unmatched in any other place in your life. So join me in welcoming Scott to the...
Thank you all. Thanks, Rick.
Yeah.
Power of nature. Let's see if I can have the power of technology. Sweet. Before I get going, I want you all to think about that first moment that you had in nature, that first kind of spark that gave you energy and passion to be outdoors. As Doug Tompkins said in that clip, we got into our souls the sense of beauty. And when I think about nature and the power that it provides for me to create change and inspire, particularly with youth that I work with, that change, I think a lot about that quote, because when I am in natural environments, it gets into my soul and it helps me. So think about that as I give this presentation. So in 2013, I was a member of the Expedition Denali. It was an expedition that was the first group of African Americans to tackle the tallest peak in North America. To celebrate the 100-year anniversary of the first ascent, we set out to change the face of the mountain and the outdoors. The project was spearheaded by the National Outdoor Leadership School, or more commonly known as NOLS. And they had a woman by the name of Aparna Rajagopal Durban who was the head of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Department at Knowles. And she was charged with looking and finding out why Knowles was predominantly white, why it historically had men, and trying to figure out why, not only at an administrative level, but as their student body, as their student population, why that demographic was the way it was, why it was disproportionate. She came up with Expedition Denali, and we were on the mountain in 2013. A little bit about myself. I grew up in San Francisco. I grew up in a single-parent household in the Mission District, and I was fortunate enough to spend my summers with my grandparents. My mother was able to send me off and do her thing, and I love being with my grandfolks. My grandparents loved nature. They weren't hikers, climbers, you know, they didn't go backpacking. My grandmother grew up on a little corn farm in Colorado, and when she moved to Nevada, she started this really beautiful garden. It was a community garden that she shared with her neighborhood in her backyard. My grandfather was a truck driver. He wasn't home a lot, but when he was home during the summers, he had a little plot of land that he shared with some friends of his, and he would go harvest some of the timber and cut it and dry it for the winter. So I grew up really early with an understanding of what nature provided and how we needed to respect it. It wasn't until I was in high school that I had experienced adventure sports. I started skiing with friends of mine in Sacramento. We'd go up to the Sierras, and I fell in love. I fell in love with just the energy that it provided. I graduated high school and wasn't ready for university. Decided to go to places like West Africa and surf. Decided to go to places like Mexico and surf. Moved up to Seattle, Washington, and lived in Stevens Pass for about 4 years, perfecting my turns, and then to Steamboat Springs, Colorado. While I was always aware that I was the only person of color within my group pursuing these passions and activities, it really never created a hindrance for me because I was out there doing what I love to do. My friends were supporting me. You know, we were pushing each other to find bigger lines on the mountain, pushing each other to find remote locations to go surf, pushing each other to be in that natural environment. However, it was in Steamboat Springs that I started to more critically think about what it meant and how I felt about it. More importantly, I started to think about my family, the future that I was setting forth for them, the legacy that I wanted to set forth for them. I didn't see my face in magazines that I looked at, surf films, nor on the mountains. And I decided to head back to school, moved back to Seattle, went to Seattle Central Community College for a little bit so that I could have access to the mountains still, and got a full scholarship to Howard University and started studying again. And that's when I was first started working with Patagonia in 2002. Well, kind of working. A couple of things that I knew about the company. Clearly less was better. I knew that they were passionate about the outdoors like I was. They were committed to what they were doing, but I also knew that many of the people that we and they were engaged with were white. Environmentalists, the employees, all the customers that came in. This was, again, kind of the struggle that I was balancing with. I loved being at the company, though. I knew that the company was committed to issues, to really making sure that the planet was left in a better place for our future generations, and that's what I was really looking for. Over time, I met a lot of folks around the U.S. that were doing the things that I was doing, that were, going into outdoor adventures and pursuits and living that dream of being in the natural world and using nature to inspire. A couple of the fellows that I ran into were Cliff DeBride and Robbie Record. Both of them were instructors at Knowles. And we would get together all of the time and talk about these issues. Cliff and Robbie, Knowles has approximately 600 instructors worldwide. And of those 600 instructors, there are only 3 that are of African American descent. So we always had these conversations about kind of the struggle, how it was disproportionate to our nation's demographics. It was through kind of our adventures together, our conversations about the lack of diversity in outdoors, and activism working with youth, that Cliff first approached me with Expedition Denali. Now, some of you may know about Knowles, but what they do is they take students into remote locations for extended periods of time, anywhere for 14 days on up to a year. Cliff was one of those instructors. I didn't answer his call when he called, but his message said, listen, I'm about to go into the field, but I want you to know that we're working on something and want to know if you want to be part in making history. He hung up. I wasn't able to find out what he was saying for a month and a half. But when I did find out, Expedition Denali was the project. And here's just a little clip about the project.
Telling me what I couldn't do. There is a certain percentage of people who look like me who have also been told you can't because of your color, or you live in the city and this is not for you.
Think about the story that mountaineering has been. It's been mainly white male. And if a little black girl were to look into mountaineering and hear that single story, she would probably say, I don't have much of a place there.
Big problem with why a lot of people, I guess, my age are doing things like this is because it doesn't seem cool enough. And I think if I do it, hopefully that'll inspire other people to do it as well.
There's never been a group of black climbers coming together in an expedition to get to the summit of Denali, and that's a big deal.
It's really interesting because I don't get nervous much for many things, but I'm nervous.
And it was rough, man, just tapping in the head wall with really, really heavy packs.
It's almost like the mountain dares you to make a mistake.
Last 2 days, I really have been in deep thought on whether I should continue on.
It's totally destroyed right now.
This shit is gonna be hard, and you know it. So as soon as you get that in your head, then you're gonna be all right. You know, it's just don't bullshit yourself.
Pretty clear that from here on, it's the real deal.
We're so exposed, just gotta be ready for anything.
I think we're evaluating the position. Conditions not optimal. I see one fall on the slope already.
When I get so tired that I can't see straight, I just start thinking like 5 steps, stop. 5 steps, stop. And eventually, those 5 and 5 and 5 add up and you're there.
It's a little clip from the film that was put together. It's called An American Ascent. We first all got together in 2011. We were gathered in this tiny little cabin in Tahoe. And I've got to tell you, it was amazing because, as I had stated earlier, the bulk of us had not seen that representation in the industry that we loved, in the outdoors that we love so much. There were originally about 30 of us, and we came from all walks of life. There were river guides, community activists, ornithologists, avalanche instructors from all over the United States. The project was multi-pronged. The first was, of course, the team. There were 9 African Americans. And then there was, the second part of it was a grassroots organizing around the US of over 2,000 people, young and old, that were to take their own 10,000 steps to Denali. Now, 10,000 steps is the estimated steps from high camp at 17,000 on up to the summit. Those organizing events were to take place on the same day that we were making our summit bid. The third project, and I think probably the most inspirational to me thus far, has been going around the country post-climb and speaking to youth, sharing the story of showing them that there are people who look like them in natural environments, creating that spark, that engagement with outdoor pursuits. So on June 3rd of 2013, we set out. We were on the mountain for 21 days. It's a great shot of us on the Kahiltna Glacier. The ultimate goal of the summit, of the climb, was not the summit. The goal of the expedition was to engage a broad constituency and a public dialogue about the inclusion of underrepresented populations in the outdoors, specifically in the field of outdoor recreation and education, and to make a profound impact on the lives of today's youth, who are tomorrow's adventurers, guardians, and stakeholders of our natural spaces, along with those dolphins. And that's what we've done. To date, we've talked to close to 17,000 youth around the country. When we go around to schools, community centers, churches, municipal parks, city parks, all we do is we take our equipment and we share the story. We talk to them about our adventures. We show a slideshow. We show pictures. We show, crampons, tents that some of them had never seen in their lives. In addition to telling our story, we also attempt to connect them with local organizations within their city that are doing similar things, so that when they get that spark and that connection, they can immediately be bridged to somebody that can help them in their area find that space. So real quickly, I want to reflect back to that question that I asked earlier, because I think it's really important for us to kind of remember those moments that we get into our souls, that sense of beauty. Is there anybody that wants to share that moment that you found that spark? Come on, Logan, where are you?
I'll bite. So I guess I'm not thinking about my first time, but when I was in undergrad, I did a study abroad program in the Himalaya, and it was trekking format. And we're in a remote valley, heading up to the high mountains, and we turned a corner, and there was just this wall of white glacier, and the relief of elevation change in front of me was totally breathtaking. And so I just sat down and just kind of took it in for probably a half an hour.
Nice. Anybody else? For me, it was certainly, yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
So my family is from northern Maine, and we used to make the 500-mile drive from Connecticut there several times a year to visit grandparents. And on 91, when you get off the highway and start on Route 11, there's an overlook of Mount Katahdin. So for me, it was literally looking out the car window, seeing a mountain in the distance and saying, I'm going to climb that someday.
Cool. Nice. I love it. I love the two varying perspectives. For me, it was my grandparents. It was sitting in my grandma's backyard. It was watching her pull cabbage or harvesting rhubarb and making a rhubarb pie. That was my connection to nature, that first spark that helped me realize the importance of nature and created an inspiration for me. Let me not touch Rick's slides. In addition, we also made the film Expedition, An American Ascent. What's cool about the film is not only does it tell the story, it has that great narrative, but it also, it's been at environmental film festivals. We screened it at the White House, not with the current administration, but we'll see what happens. It's been at colleges, universities. It's been amazing. We actually tried to have it screened here. Keep your ears out because some.
Screened on Friday.
I'll be in Boston, but yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad that you guys are screening it. That's incredible. What's your name?
Hi, I'm Emma Spence. I'm the head of the Outdoors Club.
Sweet. So if anybody's curious about it, talk to her afterwards. That's amazing. I'm glad that you guys got a hold of it.
Lindsley Chittenden Hall, LC 101 at 7 p.m. on Friday.
Awesome. Thank you so much for saying something. It's a really, really wonderful film. It's beautiful. It's wonderfully done and tells a beautiful story about the project. We also, in 2014, we also won the the Group Inspiration Award by the Outdoor Industry Association. One of the most profound experiences that I had was at 14,000 feet. This photo was taken, and not only, is this the first time that this mountain had ever seen this many people of color on it, in addition to the mountaineers that were on there as well. But we were just mountaineers. We were just climbers doing our thing, and to be included as such was a really powerful moment. Expedition Denali was not only about the climb, it was certainly not about the summit. Rather, it was to build the legacy by paving a way for young folks of color to get outside, get active, get healthy, and become passionate about America's wild places, and to chase their own Denali-sized dreams. Chris Tompkins, the founder of Conservation Patagonica, says about conservation, first and foremost, people only protect those things they love, and you can't love something unless you inherently identify with that which you love. For me, Expedition Denali is an example of the greatness that comes out of interacting with nature, this deep, intrinsic, almost primal compulsion to become active. It is the exposure to nature and wild spaces that provides spiritual and practical answers of who we are and how to live. And going forward, it's crucial that the environmental movement and outdoor enthusiasts take a much more active and inclusive approach. I want to close with a really cool personal story. This is Lewis. He is 13 now, and he's a member of the hiking club at the Boston Boys and Girls Club. And we gave a presentation there in 2013 after the climb. And I'm just going to read to you directly the letter that was sent to the climbers by the director of the Boys and Girls Club. Lewis, the boy who got to wear all of Scott's gear when he was here, won one of the club's 3 big yearly awards this past week, the Unsung Member Award. During his acceptance of the award at our ceremony, he was asked to prepare a speech. The night before the ceremony was our end-of-the-year hiking club dinner, and I raffled off some Expedition Denali stickers, and Lewis received one. Friday, he asked to practice his speech in the afternoon before giving it that night. Before he started to speak, he pulled out his Expedition Denali sticker out of his pocket, looked at it, and then put it back. After I asked him why he did that, and he responded with, "Because looking at that sticker inspires me." He continued with his speech. What you guys are doing is inspiring and powerful. Keep on doing it. So that was written to us by the director of the Boys and Girls Club. And it's the reason that I'm involved with the outdoors. And it's the power of nature that has really continued to push me into inspiring moments. So thank you very much.
Why don't we turn this into a conversation now? So we'll join you in some questions.
Cool.
All right. So real quick, before we go into our conversation section, I want to say that I've seen this talk a couple of times, and every single time there's just another gem. So thank you, all 3 of you, so much. I really appreciate your stories. If anyone's interested in seeing the talk again, we'll be at UMass Amherst on Wednesday and MIT on Friday, so y'all are invited.
I just thought of a story that I completely forgot about, because Yvonne, our founder, he got an honorary degree from Yale. He's a I don't even think he finished high school. Oh, he's a doctorate. Was anybody here at that?
Seems like an easier way to get it.
That ceremony? Apparently, it was a big grand ceremony, and the president of your university was there. The way it's described to me by some others of my friends that were there were hundreds of people, and there was an eloquent, description of Yvonne's life and a real tribute to the company, and it was very gracious. And then afterwards, the president looked to Yvonne and said, "Mr. Chenard, is there anything you can recommend to those of us at Yale University to improve the university?" And he said, "Yeah, you need to lower the height of the men's urinals." Yvonne's 5'4". Anyway,
that's really good.
Another anecdote of our company's irreverence, but I guess it was taken well.
All right, so we're going to do questions, and then we'll do the raffle after the questions. So stick around until the end. One quick note, so do y'all see the mics on the tables in front of you? You see a red light next to those mics? Do you see a button next to that red light? So when you ask a question, just press and hold that button. That light will turn green. Talk into or near the mic. We're live streaming, so we want to make sure everyone can hear us.
It's like being at the UN.
Yeah. All right, I guess we open the floor to questions. Hands, I'll call, and we'll go ahead. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Catherine. Thanks for being here. I guess on a bigger picture level, you kind of talked about what inspired Warnwear and your individual work with Patagonia, but what inspired this college tour? And what have been some of the responses that have been really positive, or maybe some unexpected things that happened? But I'd love to learn a little bit more about this tour in particular, and where it came from and where it's going.
I can pick up the first part of that, and then maybe hand it to one of my colleagues for where it's going afterwards. And to answer your question about what inspired the college tour, I might take the opportunity to widen the context with your permission, and go back to a comment I said in my own presentation that I just referred to tangentially with the slide that illustrated the "Don't Buy This Jacket" ad. And I offered that the idea for that ad really had its roots 40 and 50 years ago with work that macroeconomists were doing in the late 60s and early 70s that was examining the trend, the impact of human beings on the planet as the population continued to grow, as human technology continued to expand, and most importantly, as human consumption or affluence continued to grow, compounded 2 to 3% per year. And as they ran those numbers 40 or 50 years ago, they started to make predictions about what the planet was going to look like 40 and 50 years out. And those predictions have been amazingly prescient and accurate in the main. They missed the mark in some places. But we've, and I must say, Doug Tompkins is our mentor here. Doug started examining this in the early 70s and 80s. And he started to get to know some of those Club of Rome guys, as they were called, directly. And that led to his commitment to supporting what's became known as deep ecology, the idea that humans can't really dominate the planet if they're going to survive long term, but they have to learn how to live with the planet in harmony. And I'm giving you all this backstory because Doug, when he founded the North Face, but he sold that and founded when his wife started making women's dresses, and he realized that there was probably more future in that than tents. and he sold it and put the money into that and created a company called Esprit, and he built that into $1 billion company. And then back in the 80s, Esprit ran an ad, said, don't buy this dress. And that's where the idea came from.
I didn't know that.
And that was way, way back in the day. And it was the idea of questioning consumption. So as we've learned from Doug, and we in our company have questioned, this, paid attention to this and started to question our own role in advancing consumption. We started to ask ourselves, what are we going to do about that? That's something we do at Patagonia. We always challenge ourselves by, trying to ask the most honest questions we can. And we came up with this idea that we're already committed to durability, like that was in our roots. And if we're committed to really making durable products, can we also work with our customers to continue to use them and reuse them? Because we also knew from our life cycle assessment studies that, as I said in my own presentation, the impact on the planet over time of any apparel product goes way down when you use it and reuse it and keep it in service. How can we work with our customers to do that? And then came the idea of maybe even expanding that to resell. Could we even take back our own gear and repair it and resell it, get into the used clothing business as we're doing right now? So over time, this is where Worn Wear came from. And as we started to think this through and we started to shape the initiative, then something else occurred to us. We didn't think about this in advance. It just sort of grew into it. It was a kind of an incremental growth into the awareness that another upside of this is that we're going to be offering our gear, really good gear, for less than half of what it costs, and sometimes even a fraction of that. Mm-hmm. And as a consequence, we'll be able to make it affordable for a much wider group of people, and maybe even other people in our society who can't afford this stuff, and we can help get them back into nature. And then we started asking ourselves, well, if we want to do that, where can we go around and give this message and bring in people into this Worn Wear idea? College campuses. They don't have a lot of money. And they're out there more than we are at this point in our ages, and let's support them. And so then we partnered with Plan, and we because they already have all these contacts at so many campuses around the country. So with that, and we didn't, so we needed a partner, and we found a really good one, and we planned this tour, which I want to say is 20 some odd campuses. 21. 21. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I don't know if you want to tell people where else it's going.
Yeah. I'll list the next couple, not all 21. So as I said, UMass Amherst, MIT, then we take a quick break, and then it's UNH, UVM, RIT, and Ohio University. And then we go all the way out to Oregon, and then all the way south to Santa Barbara.
And I'll just add a couple things to that, just briefly. I mean, one is that in this political moment, it's really important to have kind of a viral thing to go from campus to campus and talk about this. So if you're interested in getting involved, I'm working to build a network, and there is a moment right now when the left can actually come together and align toward this singular opportunity to defeat Trump. So if you're interested, you can text RESIST to 76543, and we'll basically send you a mission to start working on it. That's first. The second is these sort of twin challenges that you'll face, that we are facing, of dematerialization and automation, are these challenges facing the next generation, right? This is the big context changes in business, and particularly focused on the dematerialization question. If we can find and inspire more people to start creating businesses and entities that don't need to produce anything in order to create a value to a customer, to a business, et cetera. So you're not producing a new jacket when you sell it. You're just getting more use out of it. And we see all of these things happening, like the largest and fastest growing hotel company owns no hotels. The largest and fastest growing phone company owns no switching, big switches or anything like that. Largest movie company doesn't make, we're going after and seeing the sort of creation of business, and hopefully that sparks something for you and you start looking at more people creating businesses like that.
If I can add just 2 cents to that, college campuses is where movements start, and this is a movement. So that's why. More questions we'll do down here.
Yeah, what are your company's aspirations in terms of food, like greenhouse gas reduction, and how do you anticipate scaling? So for example, are you thinking more about the production side or nutrition side? Because there are many aspects to this, and where do you see you having your company having the biggest impact?
Well, the biggest, we feel that the biggest impact resides, as I said in my presentation, with these agriculture and grazing protocols that sequester carbon. And that is the outcome that we're most intrigued with. And that's the part that we would most like to see scaled. And that is perhaps leading into the answer, the direct answer to your question, is that the amount of carbon that our company, through its products, can pull out of the air and put into the ground, it's going to be pretty dinky. No matter how big we grow this, and we have aspirations for the food division, and our hope is that in maybe 20 or 30 years, the food extent is larger than the apparel part of the business. That's our own goal. But even then, it's going to be dinky. But if we can actually inspire other companies to follow our lead on this, then we can perhaps succeed in seeing it scaled. And we're doing that. We talk to a lot of other companies and other people that are consultants and other groups that are working with other companies, and some of the big ones too. And they're really starting to pay attention to this. Things like this never work unless there's, of course, a successful business model for them. But the business model for these agricultural protocols is starting to emerge, especially because of climate change and especially because of unpredictable weather. And that in drought, the farms in Iowa and the southeastern corner of South and North Dakota, where there are a number of farms following these practices for big commercial crops like soy and corn. In the last 10 years, through half of those years, they've actually outperformed their neighbors. So there's one farm, and you can Google this if you're interested. It's, God, now I'm going to have a brain. It's Gabe, Google regenerative Gabe Brown, I think is his name. He's a farmer in South Dakota, and he's got he's been doing this for longer than anybody up in that corner of the state, and that's a little over 20 years at this point. And he has become so commercially successful that there are now over 40 farms in his area who are copying him because he's making more money than they are. Now, if we get a carbon tax, and if some of the tax can go back not just to direct dividends to all of us taxpayers, which is the tax that's on the table right now, but eventually if we could get to a tax that also returned some of that tax money to the people that are sequestering carbon, regenerative farmers and grazers, then you have a business model that is going to tip really quickly. And so to really scale it is probably going to take some policy. You know, out in our state in California, we're doing that with our cap and trade bill, the so-called AB 32. Cap and trade tax is using some of that fund to support in our own state regenerative rice growers because they're measuring the amount of carbon going into their rice fields and they're getting credits for it. So there's a big opportunity in those two things together, but it's already viable even without policy support. Sorry, that was a wonkish answer, but you know what? It's worth spending a few minutes on because that's what we're super excited in this. And I might add too that we're excited about the potential promise that it has for our naturally grown fibers in our apparel. So we're already getting our wool from ranches in Oregon that are using these same grazing protocols, and we're working with cotton farmers in Texas, and also I might add some in China to develop regenerative protocols for growing cotton. And our dream at Patagonia is that you have a T-shirt you buy from us, and our big dream is that you pick it up, and on the inside it's going to tell you how many grams of carbon your t-shirt sequestered. So that, I told you that our definition of sustainability is recognizing that the manufacture of all consumer goods causes harm. Well, maybe we're wrong. Maybe if we can actually make that t-shirt from cotton that's grown regeneratively, it starts pulling carbon out of the air and putting it back in the ground. Well, instead of doing more bad, the t-shirt starts to do more good. Now, that's a pretty exciting vision, isn't it? So, yeah, maybe we're wrong.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, go ahead.
I have several questions. First off, what does Patagonia do with the non-reparable items that you take back?
Oh, microphone. Thank you.
What does Patagonia do with the non-reparable items that you take back? How do you finance workwear, or wornwear, rather? And what do you think about the fast fashion companies that have take-back programs?
Yeah, well, pardon me. We have a multitude of partners that we partner with to recycle our products, depending, as I said in my presentation, on the fiber of manufacture. In the case of, and I said in some cases it's getting close to closed loop, and in the case of polyester, it actually is closed loop. That's where the technology is advanced, where there is a technology up and running in Japan and China now that takes used polyester clothes and puts them in literally into a hopper of a machine that chemically recycles the clothes. It automatically pulls out the non-polyester, what we call findings in apparel, zippers, buttons, and up to 20% of non-polyester findings. And out the other end of this machine come polyester pellets that are molecularly identical to virgin polyester, but the petroleum is captured into a true closed loop. And that's almost there for nylon, the two main types of nylon. And then the other natural fibers are currently downcycled. That's the best we can do. Both the cotton and wool are rewoven into fabrics, are used for stuffing in things like pillows and mattresses and other kinds of downcycled products.
And the footprint for doing that is pretty low?
No, it's not as low as it could be. Yeah, but it is continuing to lower over time. But let's go back to polyester, because again, we're right back to the same conversation we were having a minute ago about policy. Mm-hmm. The closed loop recycled polyester is more expensive than virgin. Why? Cost of oil. Cost of oil is low. Why? Fracking. No. So you got to keep asking these questions to get down to the cause. Well, why is fracking, viable? Well, because the full cost of fracking is not internalized into the cost of the product, is it? It's policy. We have to internalize these externalities, and I know the economists in the room know about those phrases, but carbon tax is certainly a good one. Water policy and management that taxes water waste all these policies are going to be required. Imagine a world where we have globally implemented policies that internalize the externalized costs. What would be the outcome of that? Well, we feel the outcome of that is that the t-shirt that you buy in the store that has the lowest impact on the planet will cost the less. It'll be the cheapest shirt in the whole store. But then guess what? It's still going to cost a lot more than a t-shirt does now. So what's that mean? Well, we know from recession that as soon as the price of things go up, the consumption goes down. Aha. So if we get all these taxes online, then the cost of everything's going to go up, but the t-shirt with the smallest impact on the planet is going to cost the less. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, but think it through a little bit more. Consumption's going to go way down. Well, maybe we're going to solve that conundrum that the macroeconomists identified in the early 70s, but the whole global economy is going to tank, right? Nobody has an answer to these things. When we first started to try to bring awareness to this, when we published that "Don't Buy This Jacket" ad, that's the conversation we wanted to get started. That's why we ran that ad. And I wrote an essay we published in our catalog called "The Elephant in the Room." Like, this is it, folks. Let's pull our heads out of the sand and confront it. Nobody's got the answers now, but we're not going to get them if we don't collectively put our minds to it. And I had no idea. None of us did. Yvonne didn't. We didn't know what was going to happen with the ad and our effort. And about 2 or 3 weeks later, I go out to Washington, D.C., and I'm invited to some 50th anniversary of the World Wildlife Fund, and all the bigwigs are there, and Jim Kim's there. Jim Kim's the president of the World Bank, and he just got the job like 10 days before. And he's the center, like you're in Washington, so everybody's lined up to meet this guy. And, you walk up, shake his hand. So I get introduced to him, and then he turns to the next guy. And then he's talking to somebody else, and then he goes like this, and he turns back to me, he goes, wait a minute, where are you from? I said, I work at this little company called Patagonia. Did you guys write that essay called The Elephant in the Room? He says, that thing is, I copied it and sent it to every vice president in the World Bank, and I said, we got to talk about this, guys. So that's, you said, how are we going to do it? Well, we're the little company that tries to, use our megaphone as much as we can. That's why we're in business. It truly is. Our owners, they don't value money that much, except for its use as an agent for environmental protection. That's why we're in business. And we're in business to try to inspire other companies. And we're successful, which is cool. We've got a really successful business model. We're super healthy. And so we always hold that up to other companies that say, well, you can do it because you're private. And we say, well, we do it because it really works. As Yvonne says, as far as influencing other companies, it's okay to be eccentric as long as you're rich, because otherwise everybody just thinks you're crazy.
All right, thanks. And unfortunately, we only have time for one more question because we want to wrap up at 6, but there's going to be a reception after this. So there's food and wine and space to hang out right outside. Do we have time for one more question? Yeah? Okay, we'll do one more question. Do we have one more question? Yeah, go ahead.
Thinking about Patagonia as a leader within its industry, but it's also a member of a broader industry that represents $650 billion in direct sales and thousands of jobs in the U.S. alone. We saw Patagonia lead the charge a few weeks ago with the boycotting of the outdoor retailer show in Utah over objections of public land seizure positions in Utah and anti-conservationist approach to public lands management. Are there other issues, and maybe this is a question for Adam, are there other issues where the outdoor industry can take a stance and where Patagonia has an opportunity to bring the broader industry along with them on climate change, on getting kids outdoors, other just broader issues? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I'm going to kick it back to Rick. I think actually this, and connected to the question on fast fashion, it would probably be good to talk about. Rick was the co-founder of an organization called the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, and I think that's really the right entity to think about the change in the activism there.
Yeah, he's setting that up because his wife is the COO of the organization. I told you it was a little interbred cabal. But there's as many opportunities for us to get involved in other issues as there are issues. Just pick that planetary boundary slide that I put up. It's a little wonkish, but it's a good one to study, and just pick a category of human impact on the planet that can bring us all down. They're all up there. And therein lies an opportunity to try to make a difference. I mean, that one of the places that, we're going off the impact chart right now is freshwater eutrophication, nitrogen and phosphate runoff. It's redlined. It's past redline. So that gets right back to the reason we're in food. That is an enormous issue on the planet. The other one that is gone past sustainability, gone past the ability of the planet to recover, is the loss of biodiversity. For the simple reason, as we all know, extinction's forever. And the company is really deeply committed to that, and we continue to try to lead the outdoor industry to double down its efforts for direct wildland conservation. That's the single biggest thing all of us in the outdoor industry can be doing to reduce extinction and to increase and preserve biodiversity. I'm speaking with these guys on the East Coast here for 3 more days, and then I go directly down to South America to join Chris Tompkins, and the advancing of her effort that our company is really supporting to create protected areas in Argentina and Chile. And that's going really well. We're looking like I think within 3 or 4 years, we will have succeeded in protecting about 15 million acres in those 2 countries. Protecting by getting them conserved directly into the national park system, the company, and then working globally to bring more money into their park systems to support the protection on an even higher level. So there's another area, but again, that planetary boundaries is a good framework to, pick your focus.
Well, I'll take it then for a second. But consumer demand really does matter and change. So, for example, partially because of a campaign for Greenpeace, W.L. Gore and others just committed to get out of PFCs in Gore-Tex and other places. So we're seeing changes like that happening that are industry-wide, pushed by customer demand. And the Sustainable Apparel Coalition is an effort that Rick and Patagonia started along with Walmart to actually bring together the entire apparel industry to make commitments and actually eventually to be transparent on each garment about what environmental impact it has, and going all the way back to the field that way. And it's probably, 18 months to 2 years away from actually getting that transparent. But I think we really need that sort of tool to actually be able to sort of say, like you said, on your Patagonia t-shirt, where did it come from, what's it doing, what's its impact? And that's the way that we actually are going to deal with fast fashion, is to actually begin to show the impact, to think about these taxing regimens, and then to really bring people along and show there's opportunity here, that people will buy a better product, people will spend more for something that lasts, and it's economical to do it. Not just the right thing to do, but it's the right thing for your value.
And the big fast fashion companies are in the coalition too. H&M, Inditex is the holding company of Zara and about 12 other brands, not quite as well known as that one. Walmart, of course, and Target, some of the other so-called big box players are in there. And, they're in there, well, there's a couple of things they're trying to do. And they don't exactly, they're a little bit mutually exclusive. They're trying to make their products as sustainable as they can with their business model. But they're also recognizing that at the end of the day, that may not be a viable business model. Mm-hmm. And they know that. So they know that the only way forward is to keep thinking about alternate business models. And therein is our ability to influence them. But the conundrum for them is that you can't have worn wear without durability.
Right.
It doesn't work. Yeah. It's not compatible. And somebody, I'm sorry we didn't answer the question entirely about some of the other recycling, efforts like H&M has going. And we really applaud what they're doing. But I must say, at the end of the day, with some of the people they're partnering with, a lot of that stuff ends up back in landfill and ends up, still going to Africa, where, which is, it's still being used. So there's a merit to that. But it's far from perfect. And there's a lot of room for improvement. And not only with them, but in our own processes too. We're constantly pushing ourselves to lower the energy inputs into the recycling and to approximate and even reach as much as possible with all materials full closed loop recyclability. Well, we'd be here all night.
Yeah, we could.
Yeah. I think
we do it every
Yeah, I think we're going to wrap it up. We still have to do our raffle, so stay seated. But before we do that, can we get one more round of applause for our wonderful speakers? Thank you. And I also want to thank, as was made clear today, an individual's purpose and action can make such a difference. So I just want to thank a couple of people who made everything that happened today possible. Heather Fitzgerald, Amy Badner, Beta Fitzer, and Amber Gerard. Round of applause for them. Thank you. All right, so we have 3 jackets. That's the fun part. Not that that wasn't super fun. We have 3 jackets, and we're going to call numbers. So whoever has tickets, pull them out and look at them. Do we want to do a